Welcome to the Snowbirds Expat Radio podcast, powered by the Snowbird U.S. Day Tracker app. I'm your host, Gerry Scott, and my goal is to give you answers to your cross-border questions, to ease the stress of a cross-border move or extended trip, and to keep you up to date on all you need to know with cross-border rules and regulations. Now let's get on with the show. Well, welcome to another episode of the Snowbirds Expat Radio podcast. We were just talking about the weather in Toronto, and apparently you guys are expecting 20 centimeters of snow.
Yep.
And sadly, we're not going to get that snow over here. And I won't mention anywhere where there's no snow. Okay. I will.
That's fair.
It's Maui. Okay. But anyway, Sharon is with Hanson Cross-Border Tax. We've had a chance to work with a few families together. And today we're going to be covering now this is really important. This is really geared towards the expats that move up to Canada, Americans who move up to Canada, or Canadians that have actually lived in the United States for many years, surrendered their green cards, and welcome home. So that's going to affect them as well, too. So, like I say, today we're going to be talking about the Windfall Elimination Provision, and we've got an expert from Hanson Tax with Sharon. And this is going to be a lot of fun because I don't know a lot about this, other than what I've read and changes I've heard about. And when the provision came out in 1983, I know very little. But one of the colleagues in our office has written a few blogs on this, Carson Hamill. So, Sharon, before we get started, tell us a little bit more about Hanson Cross-Border Tax before we get into these tough 10 questions.
So Hanson Cross-Border Tax is a boutique firm. We're located in Oakville, so just west of the GTA. And we focus on U.S. and Canadian taxes. So that's all we do, 365. And, you know, we've seen things. We get a lot of questions about the Windfall Elimination Provision. And I also deal with a lot of expats coming in and going out of Canada. And the Social Security always comes up, especially, those that are working temporarily in the U.S. And, we have a small firm, but we enjoy helping our clients navigate these two complicated tax systems.
Well, that's why we love you so much because, I always say smaller is better in the sense that, I know some of these larger firms have great people, but we do find that the smaller firms are quick to make adjustments. So today, as mentioned, we're going to be talking about the Windfall Elimination Provision, otherwise known as WEP. So my first question, why was it introduced in the first place?
Well, that's a good question. And, the Windfall Elimination Provision is, I would say it's unique to the United States. I'm not aware of any other countries that sort of have this provision along with their Social Security benefits. And as you mentioned in the intro, the Windfall Elimination Provision came into effect back in 1983. So it's been around for a while. And it was basically, brought in to balance the lower income individuals and the higher income individuals that had a non-covered period. So when we talk about, or non-covered pension, and when we talk about a non-covered pension, we're talking about employment earnings or pensions that are being paid out by an employer that didn't have Social Security taxes withheld or paid. They're not paying into that program. And while I deal with a lot of international people, and they tend to come up more when you're dealing with totalization agreements, it actually impacts U.S. residents who are working for, let's say, government or state organizations or governments. And the reason why is because they're not contributing to Social Security the same way that, a non-government organization would be. they have a special pension that's set up just for them that's exempt from that. And so there is back in the day there was a thought that, people that were earning high incomes but weren't covered or paying into U.S. Social Security would have some kind of benefit um, over people that's were paying into U.S. Social Security, and and they called it a windfall. And the way, I mean, there's a complicated formula. There's a three-part formula, but the windfall elimination provision really impacts the first one, whereby um, it can reduce or adjust, if you will, the regular the primary benefit based on the number of years, and it's usually a percentage based on the number of credits that you've earned over your working life, and it reduces it. And so when you're thinking about it kind of on a scale, if you worked, let's say 10 years and you contributed to Social Security at the high amount, and then you had, another 10 years where you were working for a government or a foreign employer and you weren't contributing, it could look like the adjustment ratio is going to be lower than what it would be if you were working through the Social Security agreements. And so what they thought was, okay, well, if we're going to have this windfall where it could artificially look like you've paid more into Social Security and have more of a covered pension, then we're going to adjust that so that it's more accurate to reflect what you've actually contributed into the program. And so there comes the windfall elimination provision. And where we see it in a cross-border context is, for example, in Canada, where you have the Canada Pension Plan, the CPP, or the Quebec Pension Plan, QPP. Historically, when somebody that has contributed into the U.S. Social Security program, if they haven't maximized their contributions, which usually you contribute for 30 years, you don't have to worry about the windfall elimination provision. But most people aren't there for 30 years, right? They're there maybe 5, 10, 15 years. And so when they take into account their the totalization agreements between Canada and the United States, when they start taking the Canadian Social Security, that ends up grinding down their U.S. social benefit, because now that Canadian pension plan was not a covered pension for that purpose.
Now, would it be dollar for dollar if you were receiving 2,500 U.S. from Social Security and $1,000 from CPP? Would it grind down the U.S. benefit down to a dollar for dollar?
No, and that's a function of the way that the formula works. It works on percentages. So the first step is basically to calculate your retirement benefit, right? And that would be at your normal retirement age, which depending on what year you were born, it could be 19, or it could be age 66, it could be 67, it could be 60. It depends on the year, but so there's that. And obviously if you're taking it early versus taking it late, or taking it at exactly your full retirement age, that's going to impact the WEP adjustment. The number of years that you're contributing into U.S. Social Security versus another plan, that's also going to play a factor. So you have multiple inputs that are going to make that adjustment, right? And so you can't just say, oh, well, if I get $1 of CPP, I'm going to reduce my U.S. Social Security by $1, right? It's usually some percentage of that based on all the inputs. And it really does, it depends on, your income level, your contributions to CPP versus, or your benefit from CPP, your contributions to Social Security. So there's no one answer for everyone. You really have to work through that formula to figure it out.
This sounds very confusing because we know there are people out there that are doing both their U.S. tax filings and their Canadian tax filings. This sounds complicated. I mean, if it gets missed, what liability is it? And, how do they correct this?
Well, if a lot of the windfall elimination provision is really calculated at the time you apply for those Social Security benefits, right?
Okay.
And you would have to look at, if you contributed to other Social Security programs. So, if you're working in any country that the United States has a totalization agreement with, those would be factored in. So it doesn't impact just, obviously if you're working in Canada. But basically, a lot of times they run the calculation, and it may be a situation where, what if I take that CPP benefit, I'm going to lose more in my Social Security. So I'm going to forfeit my Canadian pension, my CPP benefits, because my U.S. Social Security, even though I'm not the 30 years, it's still more than what I would get, with CPP alone or in combination with the U.S. Social Security when you incorporate the windfall elimination provision.
So we know what their thinking was in 1983. And I'm assuming that this was trying to make sure that Social Security would be viable for many, many years. So what are the key changes being introduced now? Because we're reading a lot about it.
Yeah.
And people are excited about the changes.
It's exciting. I mean, this isn't the first time they've tried to not just repeal it, but change the formula, right? Change it so that, it's not, you're not looking at it as I'm losing benefit. It's adjusting for, I'm getting a benefit from another country, so I shouldn't be able to double dip, right? And effectively, depending on how it was framed or how people looked at it, it was either you were a winner or loser, right? And so there's been many, many, many attempts to change this windfall elimination provision. And when I heard in January that it was repealed, I almost fell off my chair, because it's something that has been around and people have been talking about it for so long, but nobody actually thought that it would get passed, because one of the reasons is the going concern, if you will, for U.S. Social Security. And, there's a lot of discussion out there on whether or not, it's going to be able to be maintained for generations to come. And so when you look at repealing the windfall elimination provision, even though the percentage of people that it impacts is only about 3%, we're talking billions of dollars, right? So over time, that's certainly a key concern. And, one of the questions would be, does that lead into a bit more of a reform for Social Security and how it's funded, how it's maintained? Because unlike in Canada, where our Social Security is really a pension benefit, and you can get disability and survivor benefits, there's a bigger piece to U.S. Social Security in that it also has a Medicare piece, which is also funded through payroll taxes. But, there's also a very lucrative spousal benefit, right? Which in Canada, we don't really have that. I mean, you can share your CPP benefit and split it with your spouse, but you're not getting any more income, right? In the United States, the the person that's earning or contributing to the Social Security gets their benefit, but then, their spouse can also get up to 50% of that as well. So there is sort of, a cascading effect on that, where it's not just the primary person that's, earning and contributing. It's also their spouse, their dependents as well, their survivors. So it'll be interesting to see the numbers and how they work through. This is supposed to be effective retroactive to January 2024. And so from what I've been seeing is the Social Security Administration is going to be calculating those WEP adjustments back to January 1st of last year, and sending the checks out to those people that were affected. So, there's probably going to be some nice surprises in the bank accounts in the coming months as those start to get processed.
So some people are going to benefit from this, but some people are not going to benefit from this. Who are the people that are not going to benefit from these changes?
Well, the individuals obviously that weren't subject to the Windfall Elimination Provision are not going to be impacted by this at all. If they did have a reduction, certainly they're going to get their full benefit, right? It's not going to be adjusted any longer. So there definitely is a win there. And I guess on the kind of the losing side, that people wouldn't benefit, I guess it would be in the reduction of the pool overall, right? Because now, those funds that were usually clawed back are now going to be made available to those pensioners.
How does this really affect the expats that have moved up to Canada, who are going to be receiving CPP, and then those Canadians basically that have surrendered their green cards? Are they going to be? Is this going to be a positive thing for them?
I believe so. And like conversations that I've had with clients, in some cases, they've actually just foregone their CPP benefit. And so now there's an opportunity there for them to get that, to apply for that benefit and get that as well. So not only are they going to get a bump up in their U.S. Social Security benefits, but now they can apply for the Canada Pension Plan or Quebec Pension Plan without fear that it's going to drive down the value of their Social Security coming from the U.S.
Now there's another program out there which is called the Government Pension Offset. And what is the difference between the WEP and the GPO?
They're related. So, as I mentioned before, when you have the income earner, the employment earner that's paying into the Social Security, they look at those earning records and they calculate their retirement benefit. And if they're married at the time, and I'll clarify for the Canadians out there, the United States considers legally married. They don't necessarily consider common law like we do here in Canada. So if we're talking legally married, then you can look at that spouse getting up to 50% of that benefit. So it's like 1.5 times the benefit, right? And so what happens is, like I mentioned before, for those spouses, particularly when you're dealing with the state and local employees that their pensions are exempt from U.S. Social Security, there was an offset to the spouse's calculation as well. So the two pieces are, the Windfall Elimination Provision, which is adjusting the earner's benefit, and the government pension offset would be the adjustment to the spouse, the dependent, the survivee, the widow, to their benefit for that income that's not being subject to Social Security taxes.
Now, I hate to ask this question because there's way too much noise in the news these days. This was passed by the Biden administration. What happens if Trump comes along and says no? Or can he? Does he have the ability to say, no, we're not moving forward with those changes? Because it has been passed.
It has been passed, and it was passed through an act of Congress, right? So it wasn't in an executive order that was signed by the Biden administration. It was a congressional act. Um, I've heard during the run up to the election that President Trump was looking at perhaps making U.S. Social Security benefits tax free. So I think that windfall elimination provision would dovetail nicely into that. I know I'm probably putting oil and water together by saying that, but if the U.S. Social Security was to be non-taxable, then the windfall elimination provision would be a moot point.
Mm-hmm. And it does depend on people's income, on what is taxable and what isn't when it comes to Social Security.
Yeah, so in the U.S., the Social Security is taxed sort of, I wouldn't say a sliding scale, but, if you're in the lower income bracket, so the lower probably 2 or 3 income brackets, potentially none of your income is your Social Security benefits are subject to tax. So, that it could go up to 50% of it's taxed, but the maximum benefit that's taxed is only 85%. So you do get 15% tax free, and then in a lot of states like California and some other states, they don't tax Social Security benefits. So there's that benefit there. So it would simplify things, especially for retirees. Not sure how that would impact, if you have somebody that's worked in the United States but living in Canada. Under the treaty, the Social Security is taxed in the country of residence. So technically, that Social Security is taxable in Canada, but if it's not taxable in the originating country, perhaps our treaties will need to be updated to address any changes in that regard as well. But that's if those, I haven't seen or heard anything in the recent news about proceeding with those, but it may come out when he does his tax bill.
That's funny.
Hopefully he doesn't wait till December like he did the first time.
I'll tell you, this is funny because we're starting to use the word he, because, Trump can be, and of course, on a side note, being in Maui the last couple months, and we've been talking about tariffs, and all my friends, if it's members game on Friday, we're at the driving range, and every time the other day I went to sink a birdie putt, and I did sink the birdie putt, and they told me that there would be tariffs on that birdie putt. And my only response was, come on, guys, this is a democratic state. Come on, we want to feel the love here. But anyhow, in this cross-border business, we always compare RSPs to IRAs and locked-in accounts to 401ks. But there really isn't any comparison to what the average Canadian with CPP and your Social Security. They're not comparable, are they? Because when we see clients receiving large checks for Social Security, living up here in Canada, it can be as much as twice as much of what you would receive on CPP. Can you just let the audience know the big difference and stop comparing CPP to Social Security?
Well, obviously, in the last probably 10 years or so, there's been some changes to enhance the CPP benefit, right? And you've been seeing that more so over the last probably 3 or 4 years with the huge jumps in contributions to CPP. Before those enhancements came into play, it was a rule of thumb where the U.S. Social Security would be a 3-to-1 benefit over Canadian. So to put that into perspective, the average working individual in the United States can get probably $20,000 to $30,000 a year in Social Security benefits, plus the spouse would get half of that. And in Canada, the maximum CPP is somewhere around 15,000. So it's 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 apples and oranges when you try to compare the two systems. And once you reach age 65 in the United States, then you have this whole Medicare system that kicks in. So I mean, there's different parts to the Medicare. There's A, B, C, D. And you can elect to pay into some of those, but Part A is automatic if you qualify, based on the number of years. And in Canada, our pension plan is just that. It's just an income stream. It doesn't provide you, any coverage for Medicare. And a lot of that is because that's driven by the provinces, right? The province has their provincial health insurance, which residents are covered under. So there's different aspects to it, but in Canada, we get the coverage, but through different means.
Okay, interesting. And the last thought, so really the WEP is positive for Americans living in Canada, Canadians that live down south. This is a very, very positive. And as you say at the beginning of the podcast, you were shocked that this was passed.
Yeah, it kind of caught us off guard. A little bit better off guard than back in April when we got those capital gains rates in Canada, those changes. Those we were not expecting, but that was not a happy surprise. This was a quite welcome surprise for all of our expats who are in Canada, or Canadians that have worked in the United States and contributed. With the totalization agreements, as long as you can work a year and a half and get 6 credits into the U.S. Social Security system, you'll be able to get something from their Social Security plan. It won't be the full vested amount, but their Social Security taxes are quite high in comparison to ours. Their Social Security taxes, the income maxes out, I think for 2025 it's about 180,000, where ours maxes out at about 73,000. So you can see the difference, right? And of course their Medicare does not have an upper limit, so they do pay a lot in payroll taxes.
Now, I'm going to ask one more question before I let you back to your busy day. You mentioned, and I believe we dodged the first bullet on the capital gains tax being deferred until January 1st, 2026. Is this tax going to come into play? Do you think we're going to see this tax?
The capital gains tax?
The 250 exemption for individuals and the corporation paying. Do you think it's coming in? Yay, nay?
I don't think there's an appetite for it at this point. If I'm being cynical, I would say the damage has already been done. By that, I mean people have already sold and realized those gains based on that sort of proposal. And so that has increased the coffers, right? That's a done deal. People are already going to pay that tax. Now, I believe the Conservatives have come out and said they're not going to go forward with that, and the individuals that are running for the leadership on the Liberal side have also said that there's no appetite for that right now. And so I don't think it's really going to go anywhere. The capital gains inclusion rate hasn't changed since 2020. And every year we think it's going to change. There's a lot of appetite for that in the political arena. It's always been talked about to increase the capital gains tax, but I think as they've seen, it puts Canada at a very high disadvantage whether it's through business investments or personal savings. They didn't, they need a more comprehensive study to figure out how it's really going to impact. But I think they can see from what they've introduced, especially with the first 250, they're introducing a level of complexity into the Canadian tax system that I just don't think it needs, right? If you're talking about simplifying and reforming our tax system, entering something of that complex nature, because it impacts stock options, it impacts sale of residences. It's going to be a big issue, but I don't think the proposed legislation as it stands is going to ever see the light of day.
Well, just one final thought that I'll share is the people that came to us when this capital gains tax was being talked about and we thought it was going to be implemented, people just are getting disgusted and wanting to exit Canada. But where do we go? America has their problems, obviously, but that's where this is where Sharon is so valuable, working with our teams and that we have on the wealth management side. So we truly appreciate the job you do. And this is complex stuff. I always tell people, do not try this at home. This is, even with the amount of experience that I have, I'm learning every day. And today you really helped me understand the WEP and the GOP and all these other acronyms that we throw around. So I appreciate your time and thank you very much, Sharon.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you again for listening to the Snowbird Expat Radio podcast. The best way you can support the podcast is to forward the episode to a friend, and please don't hesitate to like, subscribe, or leave a comment. Now, before you go, let me leave you with one of my favorite quotes. Be kind to all, the world is small.